The shotgun barrel was 3 inches from Zoraide Banks's forehead when she noticed the man's hands were shaking. Not fear, adrenaline, the kind that made mistakes lethal. She didn't move, didn't blink. The diner had gone silent except for the scrape of a chair and someone's breathing hitching into a sob. The three men who'd kicked through the door were raw-faced and wild, weapons hacked down to ugly functionality. One stood at the register, one blocked the exit. The third, the one close enough that she could smell gun oil and sweat, kept the barrel trained on her like she was the threat. Zora looked at his hands, not the gun. "Your safety's jammed," she said, low, steady. "Your fingers curled wrong. You'll break your hand before you hit anything you mean to." The man blinked. His breathing stuttered. Behind him, the diner held its breath. 12 minutes earlier. The midnight crane sat on a corner in the Ironbound that people learned not to look at directly. A silver train car retrofitted into a diner, polished just enough to suggest hope, worn enough to discourage questions. Pop had owned it for 3 decades. Zora had worked it for 2 years, ever since Officer Marcus Banks died in a collision everyone called random. She stopped believing in accidents the day they buried him. Tuesday nights were predictable. Truckers, dock workers, men who spoke little and ate fast. The Passaic breathed rust into the air outside. Neon fractured across wet pavement. Inside, the coffee was burned and the silence was earned. At 12:17 a.m., the bell chimed. Kang Dae-oh walked in like he belonged to a different atmosphere. Charcoal overcoat, clean lines, not a drop of rain on his shoulders despite the storm outside. He didn't scan the room, he simply took the back booth that commanded everything and nothing at once. Zora brought black coffee without asking. A side of kimchi followed, though it wasn't on the menu. He inclined his head, not gratitude, acknowledgement. She noticed the scar along his jawline, the way the room steadily contracted around him, like metal and cold. The truckers shifted. The line cook glanced once, then found something urgent to clean. Zora had been taught to read rooms before she could read books. Her father had drilled it into her the way other parents taught multiplication tables. Hands, eyes, posture. Violence announced itself long before it arrived. "Predators don't rush," he used to say. "They wait until they're sure." The man in the back booth wasn't waiting for food. When the doors exploded inward, panic arrived before sound. "Now." "You don't want to fire that," Zora continued, her voice measured, precise. She gestured with her chin toward the door. "Sirens, 2 blocks out. Patrol route runs past here every 18 minutes. You're at 19. She was lying. There was no patrol, but she lied with the confidence of someone telling the truth. The man's eyes darted to his partners. The one at the register was stuffing bills into a bag with shaking hands. The one at the door was watching the street, body coiled. "You've got maybe 90 seconds, then you're choosing between getting what you came for and getting caught." The man with the shotgun stepped back. His partners were already moving, instinct overriding thought. They went for the exit in a rush that felt like obedience. The door slammed. Tires shrieked. Gone. The diner exhaled as one organism. Pop was behind the counter, knuckles white against chrome. The truckers were frozen mid-breath. Someone started crying, soft and relieved. Zora turned to clear a table. From the back booth, Kane hadn't moved. He was watching her the way someone steadies a blueprint, not impressed, evaluating. His coffee sat untouched. His hands were calm and deliberate. Their eyes met. Something passed between them that had no language, recognition, calculation, the kind of attention that changed equations. He stood, placed 2 20s on the table for a $7 check, walked to the door without a word. Zora watched him go, her pulse finally catching up to the moment. The bell chimed, the street swallowed him, the rain kept falling. She looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking, but something had shifted, something irrevocable. She'd been invisible her entire life. Invisible was safe. Invisible was survival. The man in the charcoal coat had looked at her like she was a solution to a problem he hadn't named yet. Zora Banks had just been seen by something dangerous, and he was going to come back. The envelope arrived 3 days later. Pop opened it at the register while Zora prepped coffee for the morning shift. His hands went still. The color drained from his face in a way that made her set down the pot. "What is it?" He didn't answer, just slid the paper across the counter. The Midnight Crane's mortgage, paid in full. Signature at the bottom she didn't recognize. Corporate entity she'd never heard of. "I didn't ask for this," Pop said, voice hollow. "I didn't. Zora, I swear." "I know." She knew exactly what this was. The next envelope came for her, hand-delivered by a man in a suit that cost more than the diner made in a month. Inside, an address in Jersey City, a time, no explanation. Pop watched her read it. His hands were shaking again, the way they had during the robbery. "You don't have to go," he said. She folded the paper. "Yes, I do." Because 3 days ago, a man had watched her disarm a situation without firing a shot, and now he owned the ground beneath their feet. The White Tiger occupied a building that didn't advertise. Glass and steel, controlled light, the kind of quiet that came from money deciding to listen. Zora was escorted to a private room on the 3rd floor. Silk walls, minimal furniture, a table set for 2, though only 1 chair was occupied. Kane stood when she entered, gestured to the seat across from him. "You came," he said. "You bought my father's diner. I purchased a debt." His voice was even, factual. "The building was collateral. I now hold the note." Zora sat. "That's leverage. That's reality." He poured tea without asking if she wanted it. "Your father owes $73,000 to 3 separate entities. 2 of them are not patient. I removed the urgency." "Why?" "Because I watched you manage a crisis without panic, without violence. You read the room, controlled the variables, and walked 3 armed men out of a situation they thought they owned." He set the teapot down. "That ability is rare. I have use for it." Zora's pulse was steady, but her instincts were screaming. "What kind of use?" "I operate establishments that require discretion, perception, the ability to identify problems before they announce themselves." He met her eyes. "You see patterns. I need someone who sees patterns." "You mean you need surveillance?" "I mean I need intelligence." He leaned back. "My organization has expanded rapidly. Growth attracts ambition. Ambition attracts betrayal. I require someone who can read a room the way you read that robbery." "And if I say no?" Kane's expression didn't change. "The debt transfers back to its original holders. Your father has 60 days. Your mother's care facility costs $4,000 a month. I'm told her condition is degenerative." There it was. Not a threat, just architecture. Zora felt the trap close around her like an equation solving itself. "You've already decided," Kane said. "You came here knowing what I would ask. You're simply determining the terms." He was right. She'd known the moment she'd seen the envelope. You didn't get saved by men like Kane. You got purchased. "What are the terms?" she asked. "You work for me. You observe. You report inconsistencies. You manage situations before they become incidents." He slid a folder across the table. "In return, your mother's care is secured indefinitely. No clocks, no conditions beyond competence." Zora opened the folder. Contracts, facility guarantees, legal language that made promises binding. "Your value is not loyalty. Loyalty can be faked. Your value is perception. You see what others miss. That cannot be taught." She looked at him, really looked. The scar on his jaw,
the way he held stillness like a weapon. He'd been testing her since the moment she'd walked in. This wasn't recruitment, this was acquisition. "When do I start?" she asked. "Tonight," he stood. "There's a private game on the 5th floor. Observe, nothing more. I want to know who's lying." Zora rose, folder in hand. The room felt smaller than when she'd entered. Or maybe she felt larger, dangerous in a new way. Kane walked her to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. The diner was never a gift. It was an investment. "I don't save people. I identify assets." "I understand." "Do you?" His gaze was clinical. "You think you are being forced. You're not. You could walk away right now. Your father would lose everything. Your mother would suffer, but you'd be free." He let that settle. "You're here because you calculated the cost of refusal and decided you could live with this choice. That's what makes you valuable. You don't lie to yourself." The door opened onto a hallway with men who didn't make eye contact. Zora stepped through. Behind her, the door closed with a sound like a vault ceiling. She'd crossed the threshold, and there was no simple way back.
The 5th floor smelled like money and tension. Zora stood against the wall where shadows pooled, watching 8 men play cards with chips that represented territories, shipments, and blood. Kane sat at the head of the table, calm and absolute. To his right, young Sun, silent, severe, a shadow with a pulse. To his left, an empty chair that everyone avoided. She'd been doing this for 3 weeks, watching, cataloging, learning the language beneath language. The man in the Italian suit was bluffing. She knew from the way he touched his watch, 3 times in 10 minutes, always when the bet climbed. The broker from Queens was calculating odds he didn't understand, lips moving microscopically. The dealer had a tell in his left shoulder, a hitch before certain draws. But it was the man who wasn't playing that concerned her. Min Ki sat 2 seats from Kane, chips stacked but untouched. Young, expensive clothes that announced inherited wealth. Eyes that tracked Kane's decisions with the focus of someone studying a test he planned to retake. Zora had flagged him on night 4, too eager, too loud, dressed to claim status he hadn't earned. Now he was watching her. "The waitress again," Min Ki said, voice pitched to Carrie. "Does she count cards, Kane, or just serve coffee?" The table stilled. Kane didn't look up from his hand. "She observes." "And what has she observed tonight?" Zora met his eyes, held them. "That you've folded every hand where the stakes mattered. You're playing to be seen, not to win." Min Ki's smile thinned. "Careful, you're staff, not counsel." "She's correct," Kane said, folding his cards. "You've folded 7 times in 30 minutes. Either your luck is catastrophic or your attention is elsewhere." The room recalibrated. Min Ki's jaw tightened, but he laughed, too loud, too late, just cautious. Zora returned to the wall. Young Sun's eyes flicked to her once. The 5th floor smelled like money and tension. Zora stood against the wall where shadows pooled, watching 8 men play cards with chips that represented territories, shipments, and blood. Kane sat at the head of the table, calm and absolute. To his right, young Sun, silent, severe, a shadow with a pulse. To his left, an empty chair that everyone avoided. She'd been doing this for 3 weeks, watching, cataloging, learning the language beneath language. The man in the Italian suit was bluffing. She knew from the way he touched his watch, 3 times in 10 minutes, always when the bet climbed. The broker from Queens was calculating odds he didn't understand, lips moving microscopically. The dealer had a tell in his left shoulder, a hitch before certain draws. But it was the man who wasn't playing that concerned her. Min Ki sat 2 seats from Kane, chips stacked but untouched. Young, expensive clothes that announced inherited wealth. Eyes that tracked Kane's decisions with the focus of someone studying a test he planned to retake. Zora had flagged him on night 4, too eager, too loud, dressed to claim status he hadn't earned. Now he was watching her. "The waitress again," Min Ki said, voice pitched to Carrie. "Does she count cards, Kane, or just serve coffee?" The table stilled. Kane didn't look up from his hand. "She observes." "And what has she observed tonight?" Zora met his eyes, held them. "That you've folded every hand where the stakes mattered. You're playing to be seen, not to win." Min Ki's smile thinned. "Careful, you're staff, not counsel." "She's correct," Kane said, folding his cards. "You've folded 7 times in 30 minutes. Either your luck is catastrophic or your attention is elsewhere." The room recalibrated. Min Ki's jaw tightened, but he laughed, too loud, too late, just cautious. Zora returned to the wall. Young Sun's eyes flicked to her once, evaluation without conclusion. The game continued. She tracked patterns. The Italian kept losing. The Queen's broker kept miscalculating. Min Ki kept watching Kane like a man memorizing a blueprint. At 2 a.m. Kane stood. The room stood with him. "Zora," he said, "walk with me." They descended to the 4th floor, where private offices lined a corridor built for silence. Kane's was minimal: desk, chair, window overlooking the city's arterial glow. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one. "Your assessment," he said. "Min Ki is staging." "Elaborate." "He's not gambling, he's performing proximity, testing how close he can sit to power, how much attention he can demand. He's measuring the room's reaction to his challenges." He sipped. "And?" "He's waiting for you to make a mistake, or for someone else to make one he can exploit." Young Sun disagrees. He believes Min Ki is simply young and arrogant. Zora set her glass down untouched. Young Sun is loyal. Loyalty assumes good faith. Min Ki doesn't operate in good faith. He studied her the way he did the night of the robbery, clinical, precise. "You've been here 3 weeks. You're already reading my organization better than men who've been with me for years. Because I'm not looking for what I want to see, I'm looking for what's there." Something shifted in his expression, not approval, recognition. "There's a meeting tomorrow night, private room, trusted faces. I want you positioned outside the door. Audio will be live. I need to know if anyone's breathing wrong." "You think someone inside is compromised?" "I think growth makes men ambitious. Ambition makes them stupid." He finished his whiskey. "I need to know who's stupid before they become dangerous." Zora nodded. "I'll be there." As she turned to leave, Kane spoke again. "You neutralized Min Ki tonight without raising your voice, without posturing. You simply stated reality and let it do the work. Power doesn't roar, it arranges." His eyes sharpened. "Where did you learn that?" "From watching you." The next night, Zora stood in the corridor outside Kane's private room, earpiece live, 12 men inside. Young Sun at the door, exterior position. He acknowledged her with a glance that felt like a test she hadn't known she was taking. The meeting began, discussions of routes, schedules, percentages, standard operational language. Then she heard it. A pause, half a second too long after Kane asked about the Western shipments. The pause belonged to a voice she'd heard before, Park, a logistics coordinator who'd been with Kane for 5 years. Not guilt, calculation. She tracked the conversation, listened for micro shifts. Park deflected twice, redirected once. His breathing was measured, controlled, too controlled. Zora pulled up her phone, cross-referenced schedules, shipment logs, meeting attendances. Park had missed 2 prior meetings. Both times shipments had been delayed, not catastrophically, just enough to create friction. She pulled Yong-sun aside, showed him the pattern. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Are you certain?" "I'm seeing a shape. Whether it's betrayal or incompetence, it's there." Yong-sun rotted once, returned to his position. Inside, the meeting concluded. Men filtered out. Park was third to leave, expression neutral, gait unhurried. Zora watched him go. Kane emerged last. He saw her face and stopped. "What did you hear?" A hesitation, a pattern, someone redirecting attention away from Western roots. I met his eyes. Park, 5-year veteran, trusted logistics. Kane's jaw tightened. Evidence? Circumstantial, but consistent. Young-sun stepped closer. If she's right, the Shanghai meeting next week is a trap. Kane looked between them. Zora saw the calculation happen in real time. Trust versus paranoia. Instinct versus proof. "Monitor him," Kane said. "I want confirmation before I move." Zora nodded. But as she walked to her car, her instincts were screaming. Park wasn't working alone. The pattern was too careful, too patient. Someone higher was orchestrating something, and she might be the only one who saw it coming.
The dinner was wrong from the beginning. Zora felt it in the silence between arrivals. The way Min Ki entered first, dressed too carefully. The way Park avoided eye contact entirely. The way the private room on the 6th floor had been selected instead of Kane's usual space. Larger, more exits, harder to control. 12 men, trusted faces, a table set for celebration. Kane sat at the head, Young-sun to his right. Zora stood by the wall, earpiece live, connected to security feeds she'd spent 2 months mapping. The conversation flowed like rehearsed lines. Toasts were raised, deals were discussed. Everything performed normalcy, but the breathing was wrong. Zora tracked micro-movements. Park's hands were too still. Min Ki checked his watch twice in 5 minutes. A man named Chen, mid-level enforcer, unremarkable, kept glancing at the door. She pulled up the security feed on her phone, checked camera angles, hallway positions. 2 guards who should have been at the east stairwell were gone. Her pulse spiked. She caught Young-sun's eyes, tapped her phone twice. He read the gesture, hand drifting toward his jacket. Kane was mid-sentence when the door opened. 4 men entered, not staff, armed. Min Ki didn't flinch. The room froze. "Apologies for the interruption," Min Ki said, standing slowly. His voice had lost its performed deference. "But management is changing." Kane's expression didn't shift. "You're making a mistake." "No," Min Ki smiled. "I'm correcting one." Park stood next, then Chen. 3 others followed, half the table. Zora's mind was already moving. Exits, weapons, variables. She had 4 seconds before this became irreversible. She triggered the fire suppression system. Alarms screamed, sprinklers erupted. The room plunged into chaos, men shouting, chairs scraping, visibility collapsing into mist and noise. Zora moved. She grabbed Kane's arm, hauled him toward the reinforced wall she'd identified weeks ago during her first security assessment. Young-sun was already there, weapon drawn, covering their movement. Gunfire cracked through the confusion, glass shattered, someone screamed. Zora shoved Kane behind a structural column, her hands moving on autopilot. She pulled up the security app, fingers flying, sealed the exterior doors, killed the lights in the hallways, rerouted elevator access. The building became a cage. North exit, 30 seconds before they realize it's locked. Young-sun fired twice, a body dropped. He moved like violence choreographed, precise and efficient. But there were too many. Kane was unarmed. Young Sun was outflanked. Zora saw the shape of the next 60 seconds and understood exactly how this ended unless she changed the equation. A shotgun lay on the floor near an overturned chair. One of Min Ki's men had dropped it during the initial chaos. Zora picked it up. The weight was familiar. Her father had trained her on weapons she'd prayed she'd never need. Muscle memory returned like a language she'd never forgotten. She stepped into the open. Min Ki was advancing, weapon raised, eyes locked on Kane. He didn't see her until she racked the shotgun. The sound cut through everything. He turned, saw her, hesitated. "You weren't supposed to be part of this. I wasn't supposed to be a lot of things." She fired. The blast took him in the chest. He went down hard, expression frozen in surprise. The room recalibrated. Chen raised his weapon. Zora swung left and fired again. He collapsed before the sound finished echoing. Park was running for the door. Young Sun dropped him with 2 shots. The remaining conspirators stopped, weapons lowered, hands raised. Zora's kept the shotgun level. Her hands weren't shaking. Her breathing was controlled. She'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross, and she felt nothing but clarity. "On the ground," Young Sun ordered. They complied. Kane stepped out from behind the column. Water dripped from his coat. Blood spattered the walls. The room smelled like gunpowder and failure. He looked at Min Ki's body, at Chen's, at Zora. She met his eyes. "This was planned before the diner," she said, pieces clicking into place. "The robbery was a test. They wanted to see if I'd panic, if I'd fold. Min Ki was watching. Park was watching." Kane's expression was unreadable. "Why?" "Because I'm not loyal. I'm perceptive. Whoever planned this knew I'd recruit you. They wanted to know if I'd be an asset or an obstacle." She lowered the shotgun. "They gambled I'd stay neutral. And they lost." Young Sun was on his phone, voice low, dispatching cleanup. The conspirators were being zip-tied, dragged toward the door. Kane walked to where Min Ki lay, studied the body with the detachment of someone reading a balance sheet. "He'd been planning this 6 months ago," Kane said quietly, "since before I expanded into the western routes. This wasn't opportunism, this was strategy." "He wasn't smart enough to plan it alone," Zora said. Kane looked at her. "No, he wasn't." The implication hung in the air. Somewhere, someone else was watching, waiting to see if the coup succeeded. Now they knew it hadn't, and they knew who'd stopped it. Young Sun returned. "Building secure. Police are redirected. We have 40 minutes. Kane nodded, turned to Zora. "You could have stayed against the wall. You could have let this play out." "No," she said. "I couldn't." Because the moment she picked up that shotgun, she'd decided. Not just Kane's survival, her own position. She'd been invisible her entire life, a waitress, an observer, background noise. Tonight, she'd become the person who decided outcomes. Kane extended his hand. She took it. Not a handshake, a compact. The room was still dripping, bodies were being removed. The organization was hemorrhaging from an internal wound, but the power structure had just been rewritten, and Zora Banks stood at the center of its resolution.
The White Tiger rebuilt itself in silence. No announcements, no power struggles. The organization adjusted around the new architecture the way water finds level. Men who'd been loyal stayed loyal. Men who'd been uncertain became certain. The vacuum Min Ki left behind didn't collapse, it was absorbed. Zora didn't take an office, she didn't need one. She walked the floors and rooms bent around her. Conversations paused when she entered. Problems were resolved before she had to ask. Her presence became the answer to questions people stopped asking aloud. Kane watched this happen with something that might have been satisfaction. They met in his office 3 days after the coup. Rain drummed against the windows. The city sprawled below, indifferent and glittering.
Young Sun tells me you've been restructuring security rotations, Kane said. The gaps were obvious once I knew where to look. You've also been auditing personnel files. Background checks were incomplete. Half the mid-level enforcers were hired on recommendation alone. I'm verifying. Kane leaned back. You're operating like management. I'm operating like someone who doesn't want to get shot again. He smiled, rare and genuine. The organization is stable. You've earned more than observation. Zora met his eyes. I don't want a title. Then what do you want? Autonomy. I see a problem, I fix it. No approvals, no delays. Kane considered this. That's substantial authority. I gave it to me when you let me hold the shotgun. He didn't argue, because she was right. They weren't employer and employee anymore. They were architects of the same structure. There's one thing I need to do, Zora said. Alone. Kane nodded. The diner. I need to make sure Pop understands he's safe, that the debt is gone, that he doesn't owe anyone. He doesn't owe me, Kane said. He never did. Zora stood, paused at the door. Why did you really buy it? Kane's expression was unreadable. Because I knew you'd come back. The midnight crane looked the same, chrome polished to reflection, neon bleeding color across wet pavement, the ironbound grinding through another night. Pop was behind the counter, relief flooding his face when Zora walked in. She hugged him, told him the debt was gone, told him he was safe. He cried. She didn't. She took her old position behind the counter, poured coffee, watched the room the way she always had. At 12:17 a.m. the bell chimed. Kane entered, took the back booth. She brought him black coffee and kimchi without asking. They didn't speak, didn't need to. At 12:34 a.m. the door opened again. A man stepped in, young, hungry-eyed, hand drifting toward his jacket in a way that announced intention. He scanned the room, saw Pop, saw the register. Then he saw Zora. She didn't move from behind the counter, didn't raise her voice, just held his gaze with the weight of someone who'd already decided how this ended. The man froze. She let the silence stretch, let him feel the shape of his mistake. His hand dropped, his breathing changed. He turned and walked out. The bell chimed, the street swallowed him. Pop stared at her wide-eyed. How did you? The same way I always have, Zora said. I just stopped pretending I couldn't. From the back booth, Kane was watching, not surprised, confirmed. She'd been tested in this room, recruited from this room, proven in rooms that cost more and bled worse. But the diner was never a weakness. It was where she'd learned that calm was a weapon, that authority didn't need volume, that power was simply clarity about who held it. Zora wiped down the counter, poured herself coffee, looked out at the iron-bound night, the trucks, the fog, the city that kept grinding. She'd disappeared under the Pulaski Skyway and returned as something the world would adjust around. The room bent. She let it.